Welcome to Yelling Into the Void, a podcast discussing and exploring topics in World of Warcraft. I'm Tevin. I dug this tank out of my weekly no lever key to come record with me. So Scott, how are you doing?
It's been such a long key. Did you know at some point the timer just stops timing? It just stop.
No,
It's just like no, you're done. You're done.
no, I didn't. How far do you got to get for that to happen?
I think it's like 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9.
Really? Because I remember when we were in, was it Shadowlands when you had to do Karazhan? There were those guys who were in the key for like 24 hours.
Yeah, that was
Do you
basically me this
remember?
week.
Oh, well, I will say it's been nice to actually be able to do keys,
Oh
whether
my
they're
god,
hard or not.
I love it. I love it. I love this game. I love keys.
So I guess to jump into things, what we want to cover today is probably a lot of Mythic Plus, a little bit of the raid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So if you can't tell, Mythic Plus has been an absolute blast. It's been amazing trying to get done what we could get done in week one. And spoiler alert, Scott and I did both end up getting KSM week one, which was the ultimate goal. It is very weird to me still, and I know that this is like a thing that happened in season 4 of last expansion, but like doing sevens and it being difficult is just odd. Like, I
Yeah.
get that it's an old 17, but to say like I'm struggling with sevens or I'm struggling with tens, like I don't know, it just feels weird.
Yeah, I mean it's all kind of weird, right? Like the whole like getting KSM week 1 like it's not a thing that people didn't do before now, but with the kind of abolition of the tyrannical fortified having separate scores thing, these keys are very hard and I want to be clear here, like this is going to be a hard season, but getting KSM was like the easiest it's ever been. Like you don't even have to time that many. I think I had like 2 timed sevens and like 3 untimed sevens and then a couple sixes, and that was enough.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was just surprisingly easy. But yeah, I agree with you. Sevens are not easy keys, and that is a thing that feels weird.
Well, I also want to say, and like all of the difficulty thing aside, is like the dungeons, I think, at least for the most part, and I want to talk about this a little bit more in depth later, but I think they've been pretty fun. There's definitely a decent amount of room that we have for like optimization and stuff that we can do as far as like routing. And we're, as of today, because it's the 24th, it's Tuesday. We got, you know, fortified is actually being kind of like looked at right now, and we didn't have that last week. Obviously, if you got up to a 10, you did, but
Hmm.
now that you have it at a 2, there's a lot of other things that are posing a problem that I just did not think was going to be a problem last week. So,
Yeah, I think the dungeons are a lot of fun. I know we have some people that we play with that aren't a fan of some of these dungeons, but I enjoy them all pretty much. I mean, there's challenges and things I like less about certain ones than others. But overall, I'm enjoying this dungeon set. I'm enjoying the difficulty where it's at. It is hard. Tens are not going to be a walk in the park for anyone at all, and I think that's good. I think it's good to have kind of a steady progression path in Mythic Plus, just like there is in Raid, that like you need to gear up, you need to work up to it. This is not a thing. Now, that being said, there are definitely skilled players that are walking into tens right now. I saw Dorky doing a key on his Demon Hunter this morning that was a 10, and his Demon Hunter's like 602 or something, and I'm like, you fucker, I hate you. Meanwhile, I walk into a 10 on my 611 bear and just feel like I'm getting slaughtered. But yeah, I mean, I like there being a progression path. I like one thing that we never really experienced too much in the new upgrade system is kind of the needing to push to the next echelon of crests. Because I feel like we got through worm crests, which were like the second best ones, very, very quickly.
yep.
When those seasons were introduced, and we're on to aspect crests very, very quickly. That's partially because they were awarded as low as a 16 at the time or a 6 now, and they've upped that to 9. But it does give this really real sense of progression, that you're working up to it and building up to it. You know, we didn't do very many 9s or 10s last week. I did one, and it was a no lever. Just we wanted to get a vault slot, which ended up being a great slot for me. So I was pretty happy. The piece of gear I got there. Um, but I mean, this week I feel like we're going to push into 9s a little bit more and start acquiring those gilded crests. I think is the name for them now. I can't keep it straight.
Mhm.
And I like that. I like that feeling of progression. It's good.
I will say it being at 9 is really awkward though. Like, I almost wish, and I don't know, maybe maybe this is out of touch, but I almost wish that they dropped it 10. Like, if they're not gonna be at, like, 7 where hero gear starts dropping, I
Hmm.
almost wish that they would be at 10 so that you don't have this weird, like, okay, you have to do, like, what is it, 6s or higher, or is it even lower than that? I don't know. Whatever it is to get the, like, 3rd best crest or 2nd best crest, and then you do 7s to get hero track gear at the end of dungeons, and now you're doing 9 to get gilded, and now you're doing 10 to get your weekly vault. It's just like it's a bunch of weird cutoffs, and I feel like those could be kind of condensed a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean the cutoffs don't have a natural cadence to them. It doesn't. It feels weird. I think it's there's no like clear delineation. I think you're right. I'm kind of glad. I think the reason why they set it at 9 in retrospect is because they want more casual players to get an opportunity to get those crests without having to enter a system that has both tyrannical and fortified in the same key. So they like
Yeah.
get the upper echelon of crest, but they don't have to fuck with that stuff. That I think was the reason for it. But I mean, it's still going to be really hard. It's still going to be really really hard. These things are not easy. The affix added at 7 that does a 15-second per death thing has a huge impact on the keys. Huge. I think we
Mhm.
reasoned it would. I think when we talked about this months ago, we were like, yeah, this is going to make keys more challenging. It is night and day. I mean, it is. It is like there's a lot of really painful mechanics in these dungeons right now that can get close to one-shotting people, and that is such a costly thing to happen. And then wipes, I mean, Jesus, like 90 seconds for a wipe is brutal. And if there's like if there's any kind of run back at all, that's almost a dead key. So it's this affix is rough. um
Yeah.
and that's going to take some getting used to for sure.
I just like I don't know I don't know what happened. I really feel like it's just like the season 1 blues right now. Obviously we haven't really done like 20s week 1 regularly. You and I were talking about that today, but like it feels this season feels like a very significant step up from what we've been experiencing in Dragonflight. And if I think back to Dragonflight season 1, I felt more or less the same way there. So I have a feeling that it's just like kind of a season 1 aches and pains of the fact that we don't have kind of like the previous season gear carrying us at all.
Yeah,
But it's rough.
you're definitely entering the season at the your least relative power level in the first season of an expansion for sure. Um, it is just also harder. Like they are continuing to double down on this thing that they started in Dragonflight, that a lot of the pressure of these keys is going to be put on your healer's shoulder. Like there's a lot of heal checks in these dungeons, a lot of them. Just about every boss has something that your healer is going to have to be pumping out heals on. And it's really hard. It's putting a lot of pressure on the healers. It's putting a lot of pressure on the tanks, to the level that I don't know if we've seen since I've been playing this game, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it also like there's clear failure points. Like
Mhm.
I think it's so interesting that the healer meta, when I first came back to this game, the healer meta was always like, which healer does the most damage? That's going to be the one that is the meta. And now it's literally like, why are preservation evokers being taken? Why are restoration shamans being taken? Because they pump the most heals. They have the highest HPS. And if you're doing challenging keys in the season right now, that's what you need. If your healer
Yeah.
can't output crazy HPS, you are not going to live. And I don't know, like, ultimately, if that's a good thing for the game or not. If, like, that's the level of challenge that we should have or need, I don't know. I'm torn on this. But that's where we are right now.
Yeah, I think the problem that I have with it is it feels like they took the healers want to heal argument and just like cranked it up to 15 kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah, well,
uh,
it's one thing that healers want to heal. It's another thing that healers want to heal, and if you fuck up one bit of your healing rotation for half a second, everyone is dead. And that's
mhm.
that's what it feels like. And I'm not even healing right now. I'm just like watching and observing as I watch people run keys on Twitch or just like running keys with our healers and seeing the way that they're struggling and the amount of output they have to put out and the drain on mana. It's rough. It is.
Well, I want to circle back to Mythic Plus here a little bit later in the episode today, but I do want to touch on Raid a little bit. We touched on it last week, but we got 6 out of 8 heroic this week, and I'm hopeful that we'll get AOTC this coming week. But we didn't have all of our raiders this past week.
Yeah.
I was out for one day, and then we had a decent amount of people out the other day that we raid. So hopeful that that will push us into AOTC after this weekend, and we'll be good to go to maybe start scouting on Mythic, which will be
Yeah.
fun.
I'm excited. The rate is
the
good. The rate is good.
The raid is amazing, and honestly, like Ovanax, the egg boss, for anybody who doesn't know the bosses by the their actual names,
That's me. That's me.
is he's very annoying, but like almost annoying in a fun way. I don't know, like that boss. Wholly expected to hate that boss, but I actually have a lot of fun doing that fight.
That's my co-tank in our raid whispered me after we killed it and was like, "Man, I fucking hate that boss, but that was fun." which is I think the exact sentiment you're saying, and I think I agree with you. It's a hectic fight. I'm not a big fan of ad fights, but it's one of those things. I think the reason it's so fun is because it does take a little bit of time to kind of get your strategy down. It requires a very specific strategy that is very unforgiving. There's a lot of personal accountability that doesn't have any room for errors. Like you miss an egg and you're kind of fucked. Like you can maybe recover, maybe, but you're basically fucked. And the thing that makes it fun is when all that's clicking, when the strategy finally clicks with all your players and everyone's executing it right. It feels very good. It's still hectic, but it's that fun kind of controlled chaos.
Mhm.
And yeah, I ended up having a lot of fun with that fight for sure.
Yeah, that was the one that I wholly expected to like the least, but
Hmm.
it's been a blast actually to prog it.
Hmm.
Um, but all of like our personal stuff, kind of like aside right now, I want to shift over to the race a little bit, and the race has been, man, neck and neck, I guess, because
Uh-huh.
there's 3 guilds that have been really killing it. Speaking of which, Method are absolute mad lads and stayed up until 4 in the morning their time to kill Silken Court today, and they did
Oh, they
finally get
did
the
get it.
kill. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think like once Liquid killed it before their reset, like it's kind of like in car racing. If you get like a lap behind from pitting, if you like fall, it's like
hmm
I don't watch car racing a lot, but I know just enough about it to know this metaphor. But like, if you don't get out of the pit in time, then you're a lap behind. Like that's essentially what would have happened if they hadn't killed it before their reset. Like they had to. The second Liquid killed it, both guilds, if they wanted to stay competitive, they needed to kill it today, and they both did it. So that means that we go into the EU reset tomorrow. They're going to probably spend most of their day re-clearing, maybe a little bit of prog at the end of it. It's exactly what Liquid is doing right now as we record. They're working on their re-prog or re-clear, and then they'll get on the final boss. It's been such an interesting race, and it brings up a lot of like philosophical questions about rating and what we want from the difficulty of these bosses, and if this stuff is good overall for the health of the game. I'm curious. Like, I think it's been a lot of fun. I enjoy watching bosses like this, but I've had a lot of thoughts about like these fights are way too fucking hard. Like way too fucking hard for the average person that plays World of Warcraft. Like not even the average. Like the average like mythic raider, these fights are way
Yeah.
too hard.
I do. So there is one complaint that I'm gonna have about Mythic, and maybe this is just like bitching, but I really dislike the like we're just gonna throw one more thing at you kind of changes that they do for Mythic. Like on Silken Court, for example, we're just gonna make you have to have a third web to stop the guy from charging. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's so lame. Like, why is it not something cooler than that?
Yeah.
Like, at least on Ansarek, they get 3 of the things you have to pop, which you only get 1 on normal, you get 2 on heroic, you get 3 in mythic, but you have to, like, stagger them because you
Yeah.
get a debuff, and then
Yep.
if you don't stagger them, you just die, and, like, that's cool. That's an addition of a mechanic, but also an additional, like, mechanic on top of that. But
Yeah.
the whole just, like, you just need an extra web to stop the guy charging thing, I don't know, I feel like that's pretty lame.
Yeah. So I don't want to derail the entire show because I could talk about this for a long time, but back in the days of yore, the ancient days of World of Warcraft, what world first raid difficulty essentially was is these are the people that are going to come in and kill the bosses earlier than they were tuned to be killed, right? Like world first rating before it was a big event, before it was a big thing in the early years of this game was just this raid was tuned, assuming you would have a certain gear level. The people that killed it world first were always significantly below that gear level, and that was the skill expression of like, look, we're really good at this that we can kill this 20 gear levels lower than what it was supposed to. It feels like the race has just become we're just going to tune these for those players specifically, and then instead of the bosses being nerfed over time due to gear rising, we're just going to nerf the bosses.
Yeah,
We're going to have this planned cadence of nerfs over time. It's like a certain number of guilds kill it at this tuning. Okay, then we'll nerf it, and then until 100 guilds kill it at this tuning, and then we'll nerf it again. And it feels very strange to me to be watching these fights as a person who wants to do mythic rating, as a person who wants to kill mythic bosses, and just knowing that the version of the fight I'm watching these people play is just fundamentally not the version of the fight that I am going to ever get to do.
yeah.
And that feels weird to me. It feels like design wise, this feels weird. And I like it's tough because I enjoy the race so much and I love seeing the best players in the world come up against things that are tuned so tightly. They have to do ridiculous things like one tank a fight and use battle reses to bring the tank back up when they die to the tank buster. Like I think it's fun as an observer of the game. As a player of the game, I'm just like, I feel like we've messed something up along the way somewhere. I feel like this is just wrong. And I feel like the fact that there's a lot of other guilds that are progging on these bosses that are not world first proggers that are just kind of like, guess we'll just wait. We'll just wait for a while. And it just, that feels weird to me. And I don't know how to fix it. I don't know, I don't have anything to say about like how to solve this problem, but as much as I enjoy the race, I was thinking about that a lot as we watch a 300 pull sixth boss in the raid, like
Mhm.
I just don't know. I don't know.
I also think that the problem that they're going to run into is if that we tune things to the point where it's like going to be what it is for all the average guilds too. These guilds are just going to come in, they're going to finish the raid in like 2 weeks and then or not even, probably 1 week, couple days, and then we'll be done. And then people are going to be like, "Oh, this raid tier sucked. People
Hmm.
cleared it in 2 days." And it's like, "No, the best people in the world cleared it in 2 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not everybody." So,
Yeah, I really am sympathetic to the development team on this one because they've gotten themselves in a basically no win situation, right? Yeah, like they the race is such a popular thing that they fully support because it brings a lot of attention to the game, which they like and they benefit monetarily from. So they don't want to just completely demolish that. So they have to keep going. They have to keep challenging those people specifically, while at the same time trying to release a game that the rest of us like. I just find it weird that we have this difficulty tiered system in the raids already with LFR, normal, heroic, mythic, but then within mythic, there's like a time gated difficulty tier that just like when they nerf these bosses, they fundamentally change some of the mechanics of the bosses. Like when they nerfed Halandris, they fundamentally changed how that boss worked. When they nerfed
Yeah.
the Phyraxides, that was a different phase now. Like it's just it completely changes the boss. So we're not talking about just like lowering damage numbers or lowering health. What we're talking about is taking the mechanics and making them different to be easier. And it's just like I just don't know how I feel about this. Like I think in the ideal world, it's just the stuff's really challenging if you are low item level like they are at, and then it gets easier over time due to item level enhancements, and then even the thing they're going to be doing here in a couple weeks, which is the steady, hell screams whatever buff that's going to increase over time.
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm so torn on this, man. Like you can probably hear the hesitation in my voice because on the one hand I hate this, on the other hand like the race is one of the most fun things for me to watch in World of Warcraft. So I just don't know.
Well, I will say on a positive note, this race has been very close. I
Yeah.
mean, it isn't just Liquid and Echo, it's Liquid, Echo, and Method. And that has been awesome to see.
Yeah.
Like, there is a third guild that's like, maybe they're a little bit behind now, but like they were keeping exactly up with Echo and Liquid up until Silken Court.
Yeah, I mean, they are probably a little bit behind, but the reset changes a lot of things, right? That they're going to be very close
Mhm.
with Echo going into the reset. I didn't see actually when Echo killed it. I don't know how many pulls they got on Ansarek. Probably not too many.
Not a ton. I think they got her
Um,
to 70% or something,
yeah,
70
so
percent.
that fight's going to take a while. It's going to take a couple days, and reset means both teams are going to be spending a lot of time um, on reset activities anyway. So yeah, I think it's anyone's game amongst these three. I'd probably say Liquid does have a little bit of an advantage right now. Now, that being said, they did have a 5 hour extended maintenance window that they had to contest with today. So we'll see. I mean, like these advantages like are so hard to track because of the staggering of the resets that it's really hard to know. It feels like they've gotten a little bit more time on Ansarek, but man, who knows? I just don't know.
Yeah, Max was saying today that none of the guilds have truly actually progged Ansarek yet.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
were doing like messed up comps with like additional healers and tanks just to like live and get fight timings down and stuff like
yeah,
that. So
yeah.
that
They're
they can
basically
maintain.
doing live week or development pulls. Like that's
Yeah.
essentially what it is. Yeah. So it is very close. It's going to come down to the wire as it always does. It's pretty cool that it could be a toss up between three guilds. That's always better than just the two. I've been enjoying everything about it. There's drama, of course. It's fired up, cheated apparently, and everyone's. What actually? What is your thought on that? What is your thought on that? So, if people don't know, apparently, fired up was abusing a bug with mages that has existed since beta.
We talked about it.
Yeah, you're right. We did. Um, that basically, I don't. You know mage more than I do, so maybe you should be the one explaining this again.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
essentially what happened was it was the spell slinger thing that I was talking about a month or so ago when I was asking you about that stupid question at the start of one of our shows where would you rather have a huge dot or not? And
Oh yeah, I
yeah,
remember now. Okay.
they fixed it to the point where like it would always just be consumed no matter what, and it'd go away. But you could get around that by having a target that was not a valid target to attack. And so essentially what Fired Up did was he targeted himself the entire fight, changed all of his spell bindings to be at focus cast, and then had the boss set to his focus. And now
Yeah.
this is the part that I disagree with. They knew that this was an exploit. and he specifically changed his UI around to hide the fact that he was doing this.
Mm-hmm.
That part's fucked up. Ultimately, I think, and this is coming from somebody who normally roots for Liquid to win, I do think that this is something that fired up, or at least somebody or something should have happened. I don't know if that's a ban. It probably should have been a ban because this is a known bug, a known exploit that they didn't report right away. They used it for a few polls, and this, albeit, was only like I think it was like a 2 or 4% damage increase for one member of the raid. So ultimately, like, that's not that big of a deal. But I mean, how big of a deal was it to get severed threads to 25 before the raid?
I am so incredibly shocked that after everything that happened with the severed thread stuff and listening to Max talk about like no one is ever going to cheat again. They've made it clear like no one is going to exploit ever again because they're not going to risk this. And then they risked something. I agree with you. I think it was shady. I cheer for Liquid and I love watching Fired Up and I'm not like oh he's a cheater now. I'm not gonna like the Gingy tweet or anything. I don't care enough for that. Um, but I don't see them ever doing anything because I like the bans that happened to the Silk and Thread stuff were specifically designed bans to slap people on the wrist but not affect the race. Like that is what they were meant to do. And that's exactly what they did. If you were to like slap a ban on Fired Up today, that absolutely affects the race. You take one of the best DPS players on a team out of the race for even a couple days or even a couple hours. Like that absolutely affects the race, and I just don't
Yeah.
see them ever doing that. Now, is that right that they don't do that? I don't know. I my guess is if I had to imagine, Blizzard knows that they can't do anything, but they probably sent a very, very strongly worded message to Max and Liquid about what the fuck are you doing? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, we made it pretty damn clear here, and you're trying this shit. I assume they're pretty pissed off about being put in the situation where they probably want to act but feel like they can't act. It's a rough place to be. I mean,
Yeah.
it's ironic because this is like the same thing that happens like in in professional sports where like a player is caught cheating or something other, but like they're a key member of the team, and also like at the end of the day, sports is entertainment, so you have this push and pull between like fair play, but also you would be making the thing less. It's like telling Tom Brady, sorry, you can't play in the Super Bowl. Like, sorry,
Hmm.
um, it's really difficult, and there's no clear like answer for what is the right thing to do. I can't believe they risked it for a 3% damage increase or whatever. I'm shocked that they risked it, but maybe they were pretty convinced that with a quick UI change, no one would ever notice.
I just like, I don't get the point, man. Like, you're playing a worse hero talent. He's swapped back to the other hero talent because
Hmm.
it's just better.
Yeah.
So like, I don't get the point. I don't know if it's like he noticed that it was happening this way, or I don't understand why. It seems so stupid. I definitely 100% think that he should have probably caught a ban for this, and it sucks because, like, honestly, I feel like when a lot of these things happen, and maybe I'm biased, but I feel like Liquid's normally on the like more moral high ground of these issues. um at least in recent history, I will say there was a time back in Nazoth periods where they definitely were not, but I think that at least recently they have been, and so it's very scummy to me, I think, what they did, and I would like to see
Yeah.
them not do that in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't too thrilled to read about this, and it's not good when it's your team, the one you like, doing the bad thing. You're always just like, oh, come on, guys, come on. But I mean, like this is the thing. It's like when things are tuned this tightly, when it's seconds and milliseconds and eking out every little bit of possible damage, the pressure and the incentive is there to do anything and everything you can, and
Mhm.
that's what they did. And like I bet you Echo really wanted to do it too, And if anything, the reason Gingy was pissed off the most is because he wasn't getting to do it and he wanted to. So yeah, I don't
Well,
know. I don't know, man.
I did want to say one thing that I have seen from this race, and I don't remember if we talked about it or not last week. I think we might have touched on it a bit. There's a lot of specs in here that I was not expecting to see. Like the amount of devastation evokers we have,
Hmm.
the lack of aug evokers, the number of fucking warlocks playing Destro. Like all of this shit is not things that I expected to see. And it has been extremely refreshing to just not be like, okay, well, we're gonna have two dev evokers. Warlocks are only gonna be playing affliction, or sorry, two God, Aug evokers.
Hmm. Hmm.
No dev evokers. Also having double pres, like I think the last time we saw more than one preservation evoker, or maybe even a preservation evoker at all, was on Razageth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's nice to see them back in the raid, man.
How did they not get nerfed this week? It's so wild to me. They're like leagues better than any other healer at output right now. It's insane. Yeah, I mean, I think in retrospect, the thing that they did to solve the Aug Evoker problem, at least in raids, was not nerf Aug Evoker, but just buff the shit out of Devastation to the point where people really, really are playing Devastation because it's performing very well. Yeah, the comp thing is really interesting because not only is there not like there's a lot of per boss comp switches happening, um, which is fun to see. Like it's fun to like see people try to piece together the puzzle of the boss and which classes are best at dealing with which mechanics are part of that. Again, there's also part of me that says, well, that's not good because the majority of people that play this game don't have a stable of characters they can switch between at any given moment when a certain boss calls for a certain comp. Like so why are we balancing the game around needing that kind of stuff? And the answer is, well, we're not really balancing the game around needing that kind of stuff. We're balancing the race around needing that kind of stuff. And that gets back to the whole thing I was complaining about before. But no, it's fun to see. It's fun to see things like one tank strategies, although I also think they're a little ridiculous. Like I think Blizzard's stance on this has been very clear. Like they changed Silken Court like the second people got to it to make it so that tank buster there persists upon death, and even that wasn't enough to get people to stop using it. So they made I don't know if you saw this. They made the tank buster increase the damage to the attack by 1,000%. a
Oh yeah, yeah, I saw.
thousand percent. And it's like you will not one tank this boss. It's so funny. Um, and I think that's good. I don't think there should be any one tank fights ever.
Mhm.
It's really funny though because the tank buster does 23 million damage when it hits you. So if you get hit with the thing on, it might be the largest hit in the history of World of Warcraft because you get hit for 23 billion damage.
I mean, I'd love to see a tank survive that.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of listening to Max talk about the Kaivesa raid and basically how unhappy he was with the tuning. Anything that basically requires you to one tank it in order to eke out that additional damage is just in his estimation badly tuned. And I'm kind of inclined to agree with him on that. Like it's again, it's fun from the observer perspective. It's fun. It's like, oh, like watching them execute the strategy where Scott just is dying and getting battle rezzed over and over again is really hilarious to watch. But I think it's bad. And I do
Mhm.
think that just going forward, every tank buster debuff is just going to persist through death. Like they're just going to do this for every single one from now on. Which in and of it, like, okay, I think it's kind of a bummer that like this is the idea of one tanking is now kind of ruined because of stuff like this, right? Because I think there are moments in normal people raids where like a tank fucks up and dies early or something happens, and like the fact that the other tank could possibly with good play and like dumping all their cooldowns survive two tank hits temporarily, like that's kind of cool. I think the flexibility that allows, and basically
Mhm.
what they've had to do now is basically eliminate that. Like there's no situation on Silken Court Mythic that if your other tank dies early or DCs or something happens mid pull, that you could ever recover from that, because you're gonna get hit by 23 billion and die. Like,
Yeah.
so that's like a little bit bummer that now that fun, like, in the moment shift in strategy is kind of ruined. But it is what it is.
Well, I think that honestly, the persisting through death stuff, what that does to me signify is, I don't know, it feels very weird to lose like all of your buffs and debuffs except for like one specific one when
Hmm.
you die. And I really don't like the philosophy there. So I hope that we're able to find a different solution to this in the future. And this is kind of just like a band aid for this raid. But if they really don't want people to one tank, I hope that they find a better way to do it, because the like debuff persisting through death, one, I mean, that's not very clear just in general unless you like read or have experienced it. Uh, and two, it just is not in line with the rest of the game. So
Yeah.
like we should do something that's more in line with the rest of the game.
Yeah, I mean, not having now tanked an entire raid, um, which I think is fun. And by the way, from I have no experience in this, but from what other people are saying, the tanks are getting hit harder in this raid than they have traditionally, in previous raids. So it seems like they're trying to kind of force the tanks to play a little bit better because they're getting hit harder. And I can confirm it feels like I'm getting trucked at times. But essentially, like, the question of what do we make the tanks do is always just force them to swap, and you do that via a debuff that makes things hurt you more. Like, essentially that's it, and that's all it is. And I agree with you. Like, obviously, we've seen the flaws in that kind of system and the way to cheese it. It would be nice if they find more interesting mechanics that require two tanks that are not just get a debuff and swap, get a
Yeah.
clear debuff, swap back. That would solve that problem in a much more organic way than just this kind of awkward band aid that is persist through death. And I hope, to speak in good faith here, I hope that this is just a band-aid to fix this problem in this moment, because they definitely don't want people doing this. And then after this, going into future tiers, they're going to look at this and say, we got to figure this thing out. We can't just do this from now on. That's the hope.
Yeah, I will say one of the most interesting tank mechanics that we've had in the recent future has been in my least favorite raid from the last expansion, Avarice, where
Hmm.
the tanks had to like bonk each other to clear their debuffs.
Yeah.
Uh, that's probably been the most interesting one.
Yeah, there's ways of doing stuff. Like, there's some in this that are a little bit different. Like the Brood Twister Buster, like the initial hit doesn't actually hurt that hard, but you also get a big dot on you that, when the dot runs out, the raid will be damaged based on how far away from full HP you are. So essentially, it becomes about managing. You taunt off the person so they're not taking damage during that, so they can stay near full. That's interesting and challenging, and I kind of swapped my build on that one specifically to do a more self-healing focused build to make that a little bit easier, and it seemed to work out really well. My healing on that fight was really high. That kind of stuff is fun, but for the most part, it's literally just like, we're working on Silken Court right now, and it's literally just, the beetle one does a debuff on you, so you taunt swap. When your
Mhm.
debuff falls off, you swap back, and that's it. That's it. Which, granted, that fight has a lot of stuff going on, so maybe I don't want more, but yeah, that's
Well, I think as far as the raid's concerned, I don't really have much else to cover about that this week. Hopefully next week we'll be able to explain to you how fun Ansarek is and how AOTC was, and maybe even we'll be able to talk about how the race concluded and all that stuff.
I think the
Um,
race will for sure be over by the next time we're recording.
I Honestly, I hope so. I don't want the race to be super fast, but if they're working on Ansarek for 7 days, I mean that's going to be a long time.
I think last week my prediction was Friday, and I was a little worried about my prediction watching how long it was taking on these 6 and 7 bosses. I was like, uh oh. But then Silken Court felt fell way faster than I thought it would. I did not think Silken Court was going to be a single day boss, and it was. So right
Mhm.
now, I'm thinking Friday is pretty good. That would be a full day of Prague Wednesday, and Thursday, and then it dies on Friday. It could be sooner than that too. I don't know. We'll see.
Mhm. Well, I guess raid aside, this is really what I wanted to talk about today, and that's Mythic Plus. That is you and I's bread and butter.
Hmm.
So like I said, we got KSM this week. That was cool. I do think it's easier to get KSM than it ever has been in the past. Uh just because you don't have to play the game of like, well, now I need a key that's like 2 times as high as that it needed to be because we have tyrannical and fortified like scaling everything.
Hmm.
And so since it's just one number instead of two numbers, it's a lot easier to get it. Um, that being said, we already alluded to this. These dungeons fucking hurt.
Yeah, they
They
do. Yeah.
are
They do.
not easy. And I really want to talk about kind of like, oh, we've only experienced two of the Zelatath mechanics. Obviously, you and I played with more in beta, and you haven't really played with the one that came out today yet. Um, but we had the Razagath orbs, and today we got the one where you have to like run around and pick up the balls before they hit the mobs. Um, and I guess the thing that I want to say about these is to me, it feels like these mechanics are pretty straightforward. There's an upside to all of them, there's a downside to failing it, and they don't really feel extremely invasive. Uh, there is one exception that I ran into today that has been like, this fucking sucks. And that's with the Oblivion one, the one where you have to run around and pick up the orbs on the final boss of Grim Batol, where there's like a million fucking tentacles all over the place
Oh my
and
god.
trying to get the orbs before they get to the boss.
Hmm.
It's like it's like navigating a maze just to pick up shit that's moving away from you.
Hmm.
So it's that one's rough. I'm not a fan of that. But what are
Yeah, I
your thoughts?
mean, I only got to do the Razagath orbs one. Yeah, and you're right. We played them on beta, but really didn't get that much experience with them on beta. Um, I think it's fine. I think my biggest problem with the Razagath sparks is like how long it took me to train myself to not rip my AoE stop before they were all out. Like you're like in the middle of doing your rotation and like looking at the mobs and kicking things, and then you see the affix start to go off, and you like see, okay, orbs, orbs, orbs. Okay, now, and then it's like two more spawn. You're like, fuck. But that's the type of thing that you kind of learn with skill, and you get the cadence of it eventually. But I felt like by the end of the week I was doing better at it. But yeah, I thought it felt nice. I thought the haste was noticeable. I'm a class that likes haste a lot, so the additional haste was noticeable in a fun way when you pulled it off. The hasting of the boss was definitely noticeable. If you failed the mechanic, um, but yeah, it feels good. It feels good. I do think this one is probably the first week was the easiest to deal with of all four of them. And they're going to get harder from here. So maybe in 4 weeks' time, we're having a conversation about no, actually, this sucks. We don't like them still. But we'll see. I honestly like. I think what we had kind of said at the beginning was, we're not going to have to deal with these things very much anyway. It's going to be a little bit of time before we're able to comfortably and consistently do 12s to where we're not going to have to deal with these affixes. So no, we're very much going to have to deal with these things for the coming weeks. So um, I think it's a definite improvement over the way things were last expansion. So I'm keeping that in mind, but yeah, we'll see. Um, I think the picking up orbs one, yeah, in most situations it's gonna be fine. But yeah, I heard a horror story about Siege of Paralis on that one as well, where you're on the final boss, the Kraken boss in Siege of Paralis, and those things were spawning in the water and then heading towards the boss, and it's just like, oh, there's just nothing I can do here. Or
Mhm.
maybe even if they do spawn on land, but then head towards the boss, which is in the water, if you don't react immediately, they'll quickly just you just the last 10 feet of them, there's just nothing you can do. So um there's definitely going to be different scenarios and different dungeons on different bosses that they're going to be harder or easier. But that's okay. That kind of variance is okay. And hopefully, if they're really, really, really bad, they will change them in some way.
Yeah, the other thing that I wanted to say too about these is like affix wise, it's nice to have an affix that actually gives you an upside. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago or a month ago, I guess at this point. Um it's just nice to not always be punished and punished and punished with no upside.
Hmm.
Like you actually get something meaningful from doing these. Last week it was haste, and I think something else this week. It's Leech and Mastery.
Hmm.
So it's super nice and it's intuitive. As far as like if you fail it, like last week, if you fail it, then the boss gets the haste. If you fail it this week, mobs just get additional damage.
Yeah,
Uh,
a lot of
so like
damage.
it's straightforward. It's easy to know what's going on. And I think ultimately for the bracket of keys that we're supposed to be catering towards, being like the more standard, uh, casual kind of keys, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it isn't an overly difficult mechanic to handle. It isn't like we have explosives spawning every 2 seconds. It seems like it happens infrequently enough that it isn't feeling like it's happening 24/7, but it happens frequently enough that you actually feel like you still have to deal with it, which is good. So yeah, I mean, all in all, I guess the main thing I wanted to say is like great job on
Hmm.
these so far.
Yeah.
Um, I think that more testing needs to be done to make sure that some of them aren't interacting with bosses in a weird way, like you were saying in Siege. But all in all, I think ultimately, at least of the two that I've had to play with so far, and the ones that I did on beta, they're playing out in the way that I would expect them to.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm a fan for sure. I think the big one with these, at least these first two that we're dealing with right now, is there's no specific class that can or should or deal with them. It's a team effort. It was fun in our keys last week. It was like each someone would call out like, you see the orb spawn. I can get these. I got these, and that's fun. And I like how we can kind of have a constant rotation of who's the person dealing with them. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's a win for sure. For sure.
So, a bit more of a negative on this one. You and I have talked about it in the past, but I'm really starting to feel it today with it being fortified. Stops are so fucking bad. They're so bad. They're so bad for actual like the reason I've used stops in the past and the reason I've like trained myself to use stops is essentially as a replacement to a kick
Hmm.
or stopping a cast that can't be kicked. Um, and like they're just not good for that anymore
Yeah.
because you do it and then they'll just recast after. And now you don't have your shit's on cooldown. You can't do anything about it. But I will say, on the flip side of this, stops seem to be very, very good for just general tank survivability.
which
Because
which
I
we
don't
need.
know if you're experiencing this as much because I haven't done a ton of keys with you. Um, but like just general mob hits seem to just be blasting tanks.
Oh
And
yeah.
even last week when it was tyrannical.
Oh yeah, just like white hits are hitting really strong and really bad.
Hmm.
And then like God, if mobs do bleeds or poisons or shit like that, forget about it. Like yeah, I agree with you on on both counts of this. I think it does feel good to use stops as like a tank cooldown. Um, but it is also awful to use them as interrupts. I tell you, the worst experience in the world is when a mob is casting a spell, you have your kick available, you're going to hit your kick, and just before you hit your kick, someone hits an AoE stop. Then you hit your kick. So now you've interrupted nothing, and the mob is just going to recast the spell immediately, and now you've spent your kick. That sucks. That sucks
Hmm.
so much. And yeah, in an organized, coordinated group, that probably won't happen very often. But in the way that the majority of people experience this game, that is going to happen all the time, and it sucks.
Hmm.
And like this is like the problem with wasting your kick on when you kick nothing is a huge one. And I know they can't fix it easily. Like there's not an easy way to just go, oh well, if it didn't interrupt anything, then it's charged, because the second that were the case, everyone would just macro it into every single ability they have, and then kicks wouldn't even be a thing anymore. They would just everything would be kicked constantly. So I don't know the solution, but it feels bad. It feels bad. I have so like a text to voice thing on my for my bigwigs, and so like hearing the spells like say the name of the spell over and over and over again because we can't kick it, but we're just AOE interrupting it, and it's just gonna recap like that. It's the worst feeling ever. You just gonna be like, stop it, stop casting.
So do we think we made the right change here? I guess is my question to you.
Um, I think the reason they made the change is because we classes got so many stops that it just became ridiculous. I mean, this is why Demon Hunter was the god of the last two seasons of last expansion. Um, I think something needed to be done about that specifically. I guess what I would say is maybe just take kicks away or take stops away, just have less AoE stops in general and make the mobs do less in general. And then that also solves the problem in a way that feels less annoying. I don't know, like it's really tough because it is absolutely true that a huge way to express skill in this game is if you can successfully manage to keep something interrupted and locked down. Like that is a huge part of this game, especially in Mythic Plus. And I'm not saying we should just do away with that whole cloth. But I do feel like something has to be done. This is the way they went with it, and I remain unconvinced. Like if they're just like, okay, we solved it and done, and they're just gonna move on, I'm a little worried. But if this was just like a temporary fix while they maybe try to address this problem on a more fundamental design level, then I'd be okay with it.
So, do you think that cash should be potentially less impactful, at least as of right now?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I do, I do.
Because I feel the same way. I feel like there are some casts that, like, for example, I think one of the good kind of points to this is there is a two mobs in Necrotic Wake that I can think of. And just like for a recent example, there are the Frostbolt Volley caster guys that the Necromancer summon, and then also the second boss summons. Those guys, if you don't kick them, just keep spamming Frostbolt Volley
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again. That was one shotting us today, or coming very close to. Um, and then you also have in the same dungeon the like gore splatter, I think is what it's called, from some of the mobs, and that's also like almost one shotting somebody. But those mobs also have another cast that you have to kick because it CCs somebody for like 5 seconds or whatever it is. So I think that if you're going to play that game, then gore splatter needs to do less so that we can save our kick for the one that actually takes somebody out of the fight. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I think that there's a lot of revisiting they need to do on that.
no, I mean this is the one of the kind of perhaps unsolvable problems of an endlessly scaling system. Is if you have a mob and it does two things. It does a bolt spell it casts that does a lot of damage, and then it does, let's say, like an AoE fear, like just example. The AoE fear is of course the thing that needs to be kicked, right? Like it just you have to kick that. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That is devastating for your group if that thing gets off. But then as you rise up in the key level, it's like, oh, this shadow bolt, it's really starting to hurt. It's really starting to hurt. And you get up and keys. Yeah, no, this is really bad actually. And you eventually get to a point where it's if those casts get off too, then you're dying. And so suddenly this mob that only needed one thing locked down on absolutely needs two things locked down on. Um, and then that becomes, oh, this is the only way to advance. This is the only way that hard keys are harder, is just because you have to lock down every mob at all times, constantly, consistently, no mistakes, no room for error. And that's the game now. Is the game is who can press their kick button in the most organized fashion. And I don't think that's ultimately a good thing, but I also don't know how to stop that from happening in an infinitely scaling system.
It just gives me. I think the reason I'm having an issue with it is it's giving me PTSD from when we were trying to do that 27 Everbloom and doing the third boss in that, or
Yeah,
second boss
yeah,
in that. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
oh,
Those were kicks getting off. Those were things that you needed to interrupt in that key level on a tyrannical, but also both every single one of those bosses had a thing that you had to interrupt, had to. And so yeah, it's I don't know. That's when the game stops being fun to me, to be honest with you. Like I love this game. I love the challenge. I love beating my head against the wall, but like playing a game of someone has to be shouting out a kick order, and if you fuck it up even a little bit, if you mistime it a little bit, you just die. That's not a fun game to me.
hmm. Well, I the problem that I'm having right now is I don't know where they're going to go from here. And maybe I don't need to speculate about it, but that's what I do. I sit here and I wonder how they're going to improve the game. So
Hmm.
I don't really have a good thought process on where they're going to go from here. It worries me. I
Yeah.
don't normally have myself in this position where it's like, I don't even know what to suggest to make this better.
This is World of Warcraft, right? This is systems built upon systems built upon systems built upon systems, and then suddenly you're 20 systems deep in something and looking at how do we solve a problem that's caused by the interaction of all these things that weren't originally designed in the way that they're being used right now. I mean, that's kind of a symptom of a 20-year-old game.
Hmm.
And I think with Mythic Plus, as much as I love it, and I know they're committed to it, and I know they're going to keep iterating on it and improving it, there does need to come a time where you look at it and just redesign everything from the ground up. Just like just to kind of take it back and just be like, all right, if we were making Mythic Plus the game today, learning everything we've learned, understanding the state of the game now, the tools everyone has access to, yada yada yada. How would we build this today? I think that's something that probably needs to be done, and I don't know if it's something that ever will be done. Um, maybe I mean it feels like an expansion thing, but like delves are for this expansion. It to me would be like the big selling point of the expansion. It would be like revamped Mythic Plus, all new system, as dramatic of a change that introducing Mythic Plus into the game was when that first came out is something that I feel like probably should happen.
Yeah,
Um,
I. So I guess on that though, like, is it something that you feel like just happens immediately, or do you think it's something that they do kind of like a trial on, and then eventually with the intent to replace Mythic Plus?
I don't know. I think season four is a great experimental time for them. So if they wanted to do something like that, having a fourth season at the end of an expansion would be a really great time for it.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I like honestly, I don't even know what a revamp of the system would look like. Like I mean, I guess we could spend a couple hours one day, maybe when there's a drought of content someday, we'll rebuild. We'll have an exercise that's rebuilding Mythic Plus from the ground up. Um, but it's tough. It's really tough because this game is so complicated. There's
Hmm.
so many things in this fucking game that you need to all balance with each other. So none of this stuff is easy, and I do think I guess what I would have liked to have seen going into this expansion was at least some sort of admission to some of the problems we're talking about here. Like I think defensive creep has been a thing that every content creator that makes content for this game has been talking about for the last 5 months, that just everyone has way too many defensives, and the fact that everyone has so many defensive forces the game to be balanced around the use of defensives, which basically means that if you don't have one, you die. And that's not great gameplay either. And so, like, they haven't even talked about that, or when they did, it was just like, yeah, we don't really see that as that much of a problem.
Yep.
Um, so, man, I just I don't have any easy answers here. I guess it's just like I think this is a great system. It's so fun. It's so enjoyable. I'm not saying that there's something fundamentally broken about Mythic Plus. I don't think there is. I just think as we continue to go further in this game, as we're going to get more talents, more classes, more of everything, the problems are going to keep showing up, and
Yeah.
they need to find a way to address it, I think, holistically.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair. I do kind of want to segue a little bit into the dungeons that we've experienced
Yeah,
thus
so let's
far.
talk about all these problems.
Have you I so I have now done all of the dungeons, I think at least on a 5 or higher.
Hmm.
Are you in about the same level?
Yes, yeah. Every dungeon has been done. I think I'm on sixes and sevens, although not timed of those some of those sevens. Um, I did
Okay.
10 of Siege. It didn't go well.
So I do have one thing to admit to everybody who listens. Scott and I were a little bit wrong in our predictions last week on what we thought were going to be the easiest and hardest dungeons.
Yeah,
But we were also kind of right.
true. That's the best. That's the best when you're both wrong and right.
So I want to start off, and I think the one that gets me the absolute most shocked out of all of these is City of Echoes is like one of the easiest dungeons
Okay, which one is that?
of all of them. The Arakara City of Echoes,
Okay,
not
which
City of Threads, not the one where you have to run around and find the guy.
okay, yeah.
The
The
spider one,
two spider ones I will never
big
ever.
spider.
Okay. Yeah, no, that dungeon's pretty easy, I think.
I was anticipating that first boss to be an absolute nightmare and the last boss to be an absolute nightmare.
Well, here's what I think they did on the first boss. It feels to me like, based on what I did and watched in beta, that the spider ads that you have to kill spawn way further away from the boss than they did in beta. Like it feels like managing those and preventing them from being eaten by the boss is considerably easier than it was on the beta. So
Hmm.
yeah, I still think that's a challenging boss. I think on high keys that's going to be a tough one, especially in a pug situation. But it is much easier. Yeah, I agree.
The final boss too, allowing you to kick the ads to get you out of it, is also like an extreme game changer.
Yeah, that's a pug killer boss though. I think that's one that, like, in a group of everyone that understands the mechanics, you're fine. But like, you're just gonna get into a pug with people that don't get it, or people like are running towards a pool and someone else lands on it first, and the range DPS is not even killing enough of the guys to make the pools. Like, it feels like that's very very easy, but I can see in pugs that being very difficult.
Hmm. I also think that it's one of the most straightforward dungeons when it comes to routing and getting count too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dungeons where you have to, like, it seems like, pull a ton of extra shit. This one's essentially hold W until you get to the end and you have count,
Yep. Yep.
which is kind of nice.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I mean, that's the one that really got me the most. That's the one that I think you and I were both extremely wrong on, because I think you and I both had this as like one of the harder dungeons.
Yeah.
It's actually right up there. Mists is the other extremely easy dungeon currently,
Hmm.
um, at least from what people have been saying. Um, I think Mists is also essentially just as easy as it was when it was in Shadowlands, albeit it's just a little bit more annoying. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like the ending part of the dungeon is the exact same as it was in Shadowlands, where it's like you get through the first two bosses, you get through the first two like areas of the dungeon, you get to the final area, and this is where all the keys fall the fuck apart.
Yeah.
Um, which is really depressing because it's like, if I have a key fall apart, I want it to happen in the first area, not the ending area, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of sad. What's been your experience with Mists?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy. Like, yeah, I definitely agree that the end is the most challenging part. I don't love any of the bosses in there. I guess the first boss is pretty much harmless, so I don't really think about it. But I don't love the either two. I've never liked the final boss. I do not. That's a pain in the ass boss to heal because everyone's so separated from each other. And to tank is kind of the same way, where I constantly feel like I need to pick up these ads. I need to get these ads, but they're all over the place. And then everyone's got a line attached to me, and yeah, it's just stressful in a non-fun way. but it's overall an easy dungeon. Yeah, I
Mhm.
I think you don't have to do anything crazy with pulling. There's like kind of the way I've routed it so far is that you always have to pull another pack after the boss, or possibly before the final boss if your cooldowns aren't aligning, which isn't a huge deal. I guess it would be the ideal would be you get to the final boss at exactly the right count, but that would involve pulling some extra packs that I definitely don't want to do. So that's ultimately fine. But yeah, it's up there. I think the thing I'll say is I don't think there's a uh God, what was the season one dungeon? There's not a Shadow Moon Valley in this season. There's not a dungeon that is like not only easier but like so easier that you're easily timing it on like 2 or 3 key levels above what you could do other stuff on.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to say with mists is I hate with a burning fucking passion the fact that you have to do this maze, which is a scripted event in which it tells you where to go, and you can come out, go into the maze with the same amount of count every time, and come out of it with a different amount of count every time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hate that so
Hmm.
much.
I hate that.
Uh,
Yep. I hate that. I hate their solution for some of the covenant only things in the dungeon was just to give them to certain classes. Like the first pull in this dungeon is so awful that if you don't have a druid or a night elf to open the shortcut, just don't do the dungeon. And also like the fact that the respawn points are gated behind having an herbalist or a druid or a night elf like is just beyond stupid to me. Like if this is a symbol of what they're going to do in some of the other Shadowlands dungeons with covenant stuff, no thank you, no thank you.
mhm.
This is that stupid, really really stupid.
Well, to segue into the next Shadowlands dungeon, do you like the way that they solved it with Necrotic Wake a little bit better, where they just kind of like removed it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the only one in because anyone could pick up the weapons in Necrotic Wake. It was just
Yeah.
the golems that had the sphere in it, right?
Yep.
You could activate the golem. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's better than leaving it but limiting it randomly. Um, like it just that's weird. I don't want to go back. Like I just remember trying to pug keys in Shadowlands and being like Night Fae needed. I thought that was stupid. It's like not only do you need to get the ideal class, but you need to get the ideal covenant as well. It's stupid. Um, so yeah, I think it's better in Necrotic Wake. But that's the only thing that I'll say is better in Necrotic Wake because that place sucks.
Yeah, it's a big step up from what we experienced in Shadowlands, and it's a big step up from what we were expecting to experience last week.
Yeah.
The the fact that you have to pull almost every single fucking trash pack in that dungeon, the fact that the bosses, I feel like, and it's weird to me. So, in Shadowlands, I felt like the second boss was one of the like more difficult bosses. Um, but no, uh, now the second boss is by far the easiest
Mm-hmm.
boss, and the first boss is still pretty easy as long as you know what you're doing. The third boss, in my opinion, is still fairly easy, but the amount of damage that boss does now is just astronomical compared to what it used to be. And so, like, making sure you have a group that knows, like, okay, the hook needs to go here. And now he's not going to be at the stage, but you need to point it at the stage because he's going to jump up before the hook resolves and then you can pull him back down immediately. Like, all of that stuff has to be done, or your healer is fucking feeling it on this dungeon now.
Yeah, it's stupid. So yeah, the two things I hate about this dungeon are the count and the routing, where it feels like you, as you said, you have to pull everything, everything. It's just like I don't know what's going on there that I have to pull basically the entire dungeon, in order to get count. I don't understand that at all. And then yeah, Stitch Flesh like is what the fuck. So what they did for this boss, the reason why this boss is now suddenly more challenging than it was before, is they gave the abominations that are summoned a pulsing and stacking damage, AoE damage thing. So it basically, while it's alive, it just pulses damage, and that damage ramps up over time. So the strategy for Stitchflesh in Shadowlands was get one of these abominations out, um, fight it until it does the hook, bring Stitchflesh down, and then ignore the abomination, just funnel damage into Stitchflesh while it's up, and then it'll probably summon a second abomination at the time, and that'll be a little more pressure on your tank, but it'll be fine. You basically just focus the boss as much as possible, kind of ignoring the abominations as much as you can. Like you'll eventually kind of kill one with cleave, and that's fine, and the fight gets like you could have three, and that's the fight starts to get hard, but basically it's fine. Now there are two ways to deal with this boss. Now the first is you save Lust and all three spheres, and you rip Lust, all three spears, your combat pots, every cooldown you have. At the second Stitch Flesh gets down, and you hope you kill it fast enough that it doesn't kill you first. Or, and this is where it's truly stupid, you make the fight take like 6 minutes, and all you do is just pour damage into the abomination constantly, even when Stitch Flesh is down, and you only hurt the boss through cleave damage. That's it. You are hard focusing on the ad the entire time, because if you don't kill that ad fast enough, it will just kill you. And that is stupid. That's so stupid. I hate it.
So, I agree. It shouldn't be a you focus the ad over the boss thing. But I think the ad should have low enough health to where they die from cleave while you're hitting the boss instead. I
Mhm.
think that would be a better design. And that's been my experience thus far. Albeit I play Warlock, so just generally cleaving two targets passively is not something I struggle with. It
Mhm.
just kind of happens. So it hasn't been an issue for me so far, but I feel like that's the way it should be. It should be you focus the boss, kill the ad to cleave, not you focus the ad and kill the boss to cleave. That's
Yeah.
just backwards.
Yeah. I agree. I like. I don't know why they take these dungeons and go, oh, you remember doing this? Well, we're gonna make it worse now. I don't understand. Um, and that was a fight that like it wasn't my favorite fight in Shadowlands, but like I thought it was a cool, fun mechanic that you had to kind of use the ad to grip the guy down, and then it became like a burn phase. Like I thought all that was fun and inventive. I like one of the first keys I ever did when I returned to the game was that key. I was like, oh, this is cool. I like this. And I feel like they've ruined it a little bit, so it's kind of a bummer.
Um, the final boss in here, I don't think there's really much to talk about. This boss seems more or less the same as it was
It's
before.
basically the same. It's just a long fight. It's just a very, very long fight because you're losing one DPS, and the boss also has a shield that you have to break through. So it feels like it takes forever. But
Mhm.
yeah, you're right. It's essentially the same.
Uh, so the next one to talk about, uh, I'm gonna save Siege for last. So,
Okay.
um, let's talk about Dawnbreaker. You and I were both pretty off on Dawnbreaker, and Dawnbreaker is actually like bugs aside. If we ignore all the bugs, so let's just get that out of the way because the bugs are still there. There's still shit that Scott and I are gonna bitch about because it's a fucking time dungeon and you're getting sabotaged by just walking into the dungeon at the wrong time and the game decides that your fucking ship isn't going to be there now. So yeah, all the bugs aside, Dawnbreaker's actually like pretty decent, and I
Yeah,
didn't expect that at all.
I think it's one of the easier keys. I think it's a lot of fun. Surprisingly, I think the trash in it feels good. There's not too many abilities to manage. They feel fair. It doesn't feel like you have to handle that much stuff. The bosses hurt, but like in manageable ways. Like the rude awakening for me was I did not realize how much that first boss, like the tank buster hit, like is so far the hardest hitting tank buster in Mythic Plus this season for me. Like I don't think I've seen anything else that hits that hard. Like some of them will hurt, but like this is if you don't have a pretty significant cooldown, you will get one shot, or at least as a bear. And that might not be true for some other classes, but it hurt real bad. But then like you get used to the cadence of that, and you just always make sure you have at least one cooldown for it, and you're fine. The second boss hurts a lot too, but again, that's mostly a healer check, to be honest with you. Like, the mechanically, that boss is not too difficult. It's just, it's a lot of damage, and you got to deal with the damage. And then the third boss is a joke. It does absolutely nothing. So yeah, Dawnbreaker is fun once you like get the feel down for a route. It goes a lot more smoothly. I think the challenging part of that dungeon was just finding the route, because
Yep.
it's so open and there's so many different pieces of trash you can pull. But once you've got the route down, yeah, I think it's a pretty good dungeon. I can't believe it, but I like it.
Stone Vault's the next one. And Stone Vault, I feel like I have this really weird relationship with Stone Vault. I think the first boss, in my opinion, is extremely fucking boring. Just like generic tank and spank boss.
Hmm.
Uh I think that oh god, what's his name? The second, I'm just gonna call it the second boss. The boss that isn't the twin guys,
The rock,
but
the rock, yeah.
yeah, the Scarden or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Um, I think that that's maybe the hardest boss in here.
I think
Um,
the twins are harder. The rock is going to be harder in pugs, because those crystals that you have to break really hurt. And if you are not coordinating, and if you break all three crystals at the same time, you're just going to die.
mhm,
And so you have to coordinate, you have to do it. The crystals have very little health, so it is very easy to accidentally cleave and kill them. Sometimes two of them stack up right next to each other, and the classes that kind of have two target cleave are like, I don't know what you want me to do here. Like, I can't hit one without hitting the other. But that I think improves with coordination. I think it's a hard fight, but I do feel like once you get a little more coordinated and have kind of the plan set out, it becomes significantly easier.
sure. I also think that the little orbs that you have to pick up on that boss, if you have a healer that doesn't know what the hell they're doing and they're picking those up instead of the DPS, that boss becomes a lot more annoying too.
Well, the healer should pick up some, because it does
Well,
improve your healing as well.
yeah, but
Um,
healers aren't people, Scott.
okay, that's mean. That's mean. Treat it like the boss from No Cood, and the healer needs those balls, man. They need them.
um, and then we have the duo boss. Duo boss is rough. I
They
will
nerfed
say
it
it.
today. They nerfed it today. That's good. They did it.
The the kicks that you need are very frequent. Um, Sometimes they're ranged only because the boss is between you and something that's going to one shot you.
Hmm.
So you have to have a range player kick it. Um, and just generally, I think like cadence of that fight is weird. I get that they have the whole like enrage mechanic if one dies before the other, but I almost feel like that dungeon, or sorry, that boss would benefit from them sharing health, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's because you get so many moments where one of them jumps away and you're only able to DPS on the other, and arguably, I guess that allows you to even them out, but in practice, it doesn't. I also think this is one of the fights, and there's a lot of these in this season where the cadence of it eventually overlaps into a stupid overlap. So there's a moment in this fight where the vents, so the way the fight works is that three vents will light up in fire, and those are the unsafe vent, but there's going to be one of the four vents that's safe, and that's where you go to hide from the box being dragged into the middle of the room and exploding. There's an overlap at some point that happens where the safe vent is not identified until after the box is already being dragged into the center of the room. So you basically have no time when that overlap happens. You have to be pre-moving and just happen to be in the right place. Supposedly, I haven't done the key yet this week. They fixed that. They removed some of the bad overlaps in the key, which will solve a big part of that problem. They also increased the cast time for the kick that you need to interrupt by a
Yep.
second, so that should help with that as well. Um, But yeah, it's a tough boss. I kind of agree that it would be easier if they shared health pool. It like feels like every duo boss we have this season is just like we're gonna just share health. And this is like the one exception to that.
Mhm. The final boss, in trash leading up to the final boss, dude. I I fucking hate the trash leading up to the final boss. Like with a burning, like I think it. If Siege didn't exist, it would be easily like my most hated trash in the entire season.
Yeah, that's
Unfortunately,
fair.
Siege does exist.
That's fair. And the problem with how it's laid out is you really want to pull it big and you just can't. Like you just can't. Like basically each one of these packs going into the final boss, like you have to pull on its own, especially in a fortified key, and that doesn't feel good. And then it hurts anyway. It's really rough. But I think the final boss is pretty easy.
Yeah, I think the final boss is easy. Um, Annoying for casters, but honestly, not a hard boss.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
an annoyance.
sure.
Um, so, God, what do we have left? Oh, I guess we can do Grimbatol. Grimbatol, I don't know how you feel about this dungeon, and I don't really have a lot to say about the bosses in here. I think that they're interesting. I think the redo of this dungeon has been pretty good, at least from my perspective. Um, this is one of those keys where I feel like it either goes well or it's just dog shit. Like it doesn't seem like there's really an in between in this place.
I think this is the dungeon that is probably the most tank responsibility out of any of them. Like a lot of the bosses, the last two bosses at least, well not the second boss and the final boss have a lot of individual tank responsibility where the tank is really going to be the defining force of whether you're successful on that fight or not, which means my groups haven't gone very well. But the trash, I mean, I don't know, it is also one of those dungeons that felt a lot more difficult while I was still trying to figure out my routes, and now like once I figured out the route I feel like it's just going to get easier and easier over time. But some of the trash really does really hurt like a lot.
Mhm.
There's those one ogres that like constantly get a stacking damage buff on them through a berserk thing. And I'm lucky enough to where I soothe them and I can kind of lock one of them down with soothe. Like I just soothe them on cooldown and it never gets too high. But I was talking with my co-tank who's a brewmaster and he's just like, y'all, I need to kite these things. Like they're just, it stacks up too high. And we weren't even doing it on a fortified. So I can imagine when that thing lives longer and you don't have a soothe for it, that's going to start hitting quite a bit. On top
Mhm.
of all the other damage that's going on in the key. Like the heal absorb curse is so fucking brutal on that dungeon. Like I think I saw a note that they reduce the number of people it's cast on and only cast on one now instead of two. That's a pretty big change.
Yeah, that happened, and it made those mobs a lot easier. Now, that aside, there are packs with 2 and 3 warlocks in them.
Yeah.
So, like, that's still a problem,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, you're still getting potentially 2 to 3 of these cast out at the same time,
Hmm.
but you're not getting 6.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough dungeon. It's to me it often feels tough but fair, which is like I'm struggling with it. I'm not doing well. I haven't timed it very high yet, but I also feel like with gear and experience and a better route, I feel like that will become a key that I don't despise.
mhm. Well, unfortunately, we have the 2 dungeons that I these are the only 2 dungeons in the season where I can confidently say, like, I am not enjoying these right now. Um, we'll talk about City of Threads first. It sucks because I think I enjoy this key until you get to the final boss. And dude, the fucking final boss is just shit. It's not fun. It's too much fucking damage. There's a fucking route that range needs to be in, but you also need to be away from people because there's fucking ads. There's shit like balls being thrown everywhere. Like it's just there's way too much going on in this fight. It's just not fun for me at all.
It yeah, I love this dungeon. I love every bit of it. I think this fight needs to be toned down quite a bit. I think the one change they made over the weekend is they made the splice cast, which was 9 seconds. They reduced it to 6 seconds. So there were these really brutal overlap where you would get this group wide splice that would be this ticking dot on everyone that hurts them a lot, and then a big damage slam right after it. Where at the time, splice technically was still on the characters while the damage slam was happening. So like healers just like could not keep up, and our healer we play with was just pumping HPS. It's like he wasn't doing anything wrong. He just could not keep up with the damage. It was just too ridiculous. And so that helped, but I agree like the damage output is insane. And then like it's very very punishing. Yeah, you have to stack up, and if you don't stack close enough, then you can't clear the things in time, and then you die. I want to say I've been loving playing bear, but I'm so spoiled with druid and my can shapeshift out of roots thing, and that I can't do it now, and it drives me crazy. Like there's so many times where I'm just like, oh, I can shapeshift out of this. Nope, no, I can't. No, I can't. Like I miss it so much. But yeah, it's a very punishing boss. It's sad too because I feel like tuned correctly, I think this is a very fun boss because I do like the cadence of, you know, the balls are going to move, then it's going to be one of the two ads, and so you have to kind of be ready to go in or out, and then but then the next one is easier because you know it, and then he does the thing with the big tank hit at the end, and like I think this is a fun cadence of abilities and how to manage them, but it's just tuned too high for sure.
I think so. My suggestion to fix this is very simple. Make the orb like displacement thing less frequent. I think that's the only change you need to make. And I think that this boss becomes way more reasonable
Yeah.
because your healers can plant and heal you, your casters can plant and deal damage, and it makes the like, because the way it currently lines up is if you don't get the root first and you get the big bug slam first, you get orbs spawning, orbs being thrown, orbs being thrown, big bug slam, and then you have what is it? It's either two or three of the orbs being thrown casts, but the last one is as you are should be stacking up for the root.
Hmm.
And that is just shit because
Yeah.
now you're wanting to bait things away and then you're going to need to hurry and get stacked back up. Oh, your healer didn't get stacked up. They're out there by themselves not getting broken out. Oh, well, hey, guess what? We're throwing the balls again and your healer's going to get two of them and now they're dead.
Yeah, it's another one of those weird overlapping mechanics thing. And I can't decide if like when these mechanics overlap in this way, if that's something that's done by design or it just happens and they decide not to do anything about it. I think the giant boss in Siege of Borealis is a great example of this. I know we're going to get to that in a sec, but yeah, it feels like this is one of those things where we need to look at the cadence of abilities and how timing of things shifts as the fight goes on and becomes worse and worse. And is that what we want? Like, is that actually a designed way to make the dungeon harder that you have to do this move right before the stack? I don't know. I'm not a fan of it either.
Um, well, I guess let's talk about Siege. Uh,
Yeah, I hate this place.
I-
I hate it.
I'm gonna be straightforward with this. There is nothing about this dungeon I like. I like straight up, honestly, not a single fucking thing about this place that I like.
I like it aesthetically. I like the look of it.
Nope.
I like the pirate stuff. I like monkey pirates. I think that's funny. Um, that's about it. So my thing is like my frustration with this dungeon is every single one of the boss fights is in theory something that I think is fun, but in execution is absolutely miserable. Like if you describe a boss fight to me that is this guy randomly targets someone and chases after them and you have to kite them over a bomb, that sounds fun. If you're talking about like the second boss where she has these up phases where it's just kind of a Halandrous dance. No, that's not the right name. What is the name? The dance from the safety dance um, from Nax. I don't remember what that guy's name was, but it doesn't matter.
Oh, I can't remember.
Um, while also dealing with killing some ads, that sounds fun. The giant boss, like having to use the statue in the fountain in the middle to dodge the waves, That sounds fun. And like the concept of the Kraken fight at the end of having to free these guys from tentacles so they repair a cannon so you can shoot a cannon on it, that sounds fun. But in execution, they all suck for various degrees of stupidness. Like the first boss just feels really gimmicky sometimes, and there's so much RNG with where the bombs are going to go. And it feels really, really frustrating as a tank. Like just tanking ads isn't fun. The second boss is so finicky. Like these mechanics that like the second you're out of range of the boss, they fire this incredibly deadly dot on someone. But also there's going to be these circles that appear that you have to dodge. So good luck trying to dodge the circles while staying in melee with the boss. Good luck with that. Um, and the third boss has the dumbest overlap I've seen in the history of playing this game. So for those that don't know, the way the third boss works is he does random puddles on the ground under players. Then he does a frontal that is like a wave of ice, I think. I don't know. It's just a wave in front of him that hits everything in front of him and kills them. And then he occasionally summons two walls of water that spread across the square room, and you need to stand on the other side of a fountain and have the fountain block them and move from side to side. Well, the third set of water walls, for some reason, the boss will also do the frontal at the same time. So he summons the water wall, you running to get into safety, and then he does the frontal. Um, it sucks. It sucks. And the way those two abilities are timed, it's not like, because what I originally thought it was when I first saw it was like, oh, so the thing to do here is see the water wall, know which side I have to run to, bait the frontal away from the group, and then get over there. But the timing of it is actually the frontal goes off at the same time the wall of water is going to be hitting you. So there's there's no way of doing that. What you have to actually do is position the boss in such a way that you are in like safe and can step left or right to dodge the frontal while still being technically behind the statue. It's just bad. It's just stupid and bad, and I don't like it. It like at that point you have solved the boss. Like it's still a challenging fight, but you've kind of solved it, and then you have to do this random overlap caused additional problem. I hate it so much. I hate it.
I want to talk about the trash in this place.
Okay, go for it.
This is the stupidest design trash I have ever dealt with, ever. And I don't know if it's because I played a melee back in BFA that I just like didn't fucking remember this at all. But the guys who pull you in on like a 10-second timer, it feels like every
Mhm.
10 seconds you're getting pulled to these fucking mobs. Holy shit, dude.
Yeah.
And then there's just unavoidable damage being sent out everywhere. There's kicks you have to get. And like they shorten the range at which they do the pull now and you can LOS it. But like, just what the fuck?
Yeah, it's nuts. It is really nuts. There's there's so many kicks you need to do. Like one of these mobs has the exact problem we were talking about earlier, where they have this shield cast that they put up, and you have to kick that. You like have to kick that shield. But they are also spam casting bolt spells that do just a shit ton of damage. Like they do so much damage. There is later in the dungeon there are rogues that apply a stacking poison debuff to you, and it hurts so bad that we did the 10 of this, and like this was the first time in tanking that I was just like, I cannot survive. I could press every single button and I cannot survive this, and I am dispelling the poison off me on cooldown. Like the second my dispel is up, I'm removing it, and it doesn't matter. It's just chunking my hit points. This poison at like 4 or 5 stacks was ticking for 2 million a tick. It's just insane. There's too much going on. That like you're absolutely right. This is like the poster child for we've put too many abilities on mobs is this dungeon, because there's just always stuff, and they added more abilities to it. Like I think what I've been told, I didn't do this dungeon at content, but what I've been told is the bellowing shout cast that was something that some of the mobs in Freeport had. Um,
Mhm.
Freehold, whatever that one.
Freehold. Yeah.
Um,
Freehold.
that's something that they added to this dungeon as well because they're like, these mobs aren't doing enough, so we'll have an AOE that does huge damage and interrupts because people don't have enough to deal with. So yeah, it's all bad. It's all bad.
The biggest problem that with this too is the trash that I'm complaining about is right before the first boss. And every mob that you fight before the first boss is also a type of a mob that the first boss can spawn.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh and believe it or not, when you're trying to kite the boss into a bomb and then you just happen to be between the bomb and where you're going to get pulled to, the mobs can just pull you into the fucking bomb you're trying to kite the boss into, and then you just die. Like, what the hell, man?
Oh my god. Oh my
It's
god.
so bad.
Yeah.
It's so bad. It's it just like I don't understand how this dungeon can have such astronomically bad trash comparatively to the rest of the dungeons in the season. Like,
Yeah.
it is just so bad.
I didn't talk about my favorite thing the second boss does. They fixed this today, by the way. Thank goodness. They fixed this today. The second boss has a frontal, a very bad frontal that if you get hit by it, you die. You can dodge the frontal. Even the tank can dodge the frontal, though. The frontal doesn't have an indicator, by the way. They added all these cool indicators to frontals, and I guess they just like, oops, forgot this one. Apparently, they've added an indicator for it now. But there's this fun thing that this boss did, and I got blamed for this at first, and then we realized it was a bug. If the boss is casting their frontal, and then it goes into the phase where like artillery cannons shoot from the ship, for whatever reason, the boss will just turn to face the direction that the first cannons are landing. Um, Even if they were mid cast on the frontal, and so the frontal will go off in that direction. So several people in my keys last week died to this because I tank the boss in the same place, I point the frontal in the same place, so they were in a place that was safe. And then suddenly, at the last second, the boss turns, frontal goes off, they die, and they've fixed this today, thank goodness. But like, I don't know how how does the shit not get fixed before the keys go out? Like, this is the frustrating part. Is like there's so many issues in this dungeon. They made a lot of changes in this dungeon today, and it's just like, y'all, come on. like the Kraken boss at the end, they removed the stupid knockback from the slam, which is just such an obvious change because it's a boss fight with random swirlies being thrown on the ground, and you cannot control if you get knocked back into them. And also, if the tank gets away from the tentacle for a second, the tentacle will just do a AoE huge damage knock and you die. So I get knocked back, and then there's two swirlies right between me and the tentacle, and I can't get back right away. Oops, sorry everyone. It's just like, I'm glad they fixed this stuff, and it's encouraging to see that they are monitoring these dungeons and fixing like the biggest problems. But like, how does this make it to live? That's the frustrating part.
I'm really sad that you called that change obvious because like I was about to take credit for that because I was thinking yesterday after we did our 10, I was like, man, if that just didn't knock back, like how much different that boss fight would be. And then they did that today, and I was like, oh, that was kind of cool. I like that change. But then you went
Sorry.
and called it obvious, and
I
now I
just feel
feel
like
like
it's like, it's so stupid too. The reason why it's especially annoyed me is because it knocks you back just close enough to the boss to still be too close to charge back with like the to feral charge back. And so like that's like my instinct when I get knocked back on bear is to like mash that button right away, right? And it is so annoying when it doesn't do anything. I'm just like, God, no, charge, you idiot.
just kick it or whatever. Doesn't your kick also charge you to it without a minimum range?
Yes, it
There you go.
does.
Just press your kick.
Interesting. My
Well, you don't have
kick.
to do that anymore because it's not gonna knock you back anymore. But yeah.
Interesting. Feral charge, eh? or feral, whatever it is, whatever my kick
Just hope you
is.
don't have to kick anything else.
Yeah. Well, not in that fight, you don't. But yeah,
Yeah, Siege, dog shit, F tier dungeon.
yeah.
I
I hope they make some big changes. I want to like the dungeon. I really do. I like the
I don't want
aesthetic.
to be a Debbie Downer, but this might be my least favorite dungeon of the past like 4 years. Like it
Whoa.
is so fucking dog shit.
All right. Well, guess what my key is?
Uh,
No,
a
it's a
nine
it's a
siege.
it's a 9 mists. So we'll
Okay,
see fine.
thank God. Okay, doable key. But Scott, I think we are running out of time, so we should probably wrap it up. What do you say?
Yeah, that sounds good. I think we went longer than we wanted to.
So, question for the week is, how far did you guys get in raid this week, or what would you get done in Mythic Plus? What were your goals? Did you meet your goals? If not, uh, well, what's going on? No,
How
I'm just
many
kidding. Go ahead.
how many delves did you do?
Yeah, how many delves did you do? Delves changed my life, man.
Oh my
I
god. Oh my god. The Reddit threads about delves just were cracking me up. Um I didn't step foot in delves this week, by the way, and I probably never will again.
but yeah, we want to know how far you got in raid, what you did in Mythic Plus, and what your goals are, what they were for last week, or what they are here for the coming future. So let us know over on YouTube in the comments section at Yelling Into the Void Wow on YouTube. You can let us know on Twitter, which is at Into the Void Wow. And the email is yellingintothevoidwow@gmail.com. So let us know over there as well.
All right. If you are not already subscribed to this podcast, we strongly encourage you folks to do so. More Mythic content, Mythic Plus content to come. We're going to see how our opinions about these dungeons change as we continue to get better gear and get better at them. Maybe by the end of the season, Tevin, Siege, favorite dungeon ever? Maybe.
I hope not.
You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else in the world podcasts can be found.
And then please consider liking, subscribing, commenting on the YouTube videos. As always, these help us get exposed to more people. So if you enjoy what we're doing here, please do that. Also, I did want to make a quick call out. I said streams are going to be picking back up. That is still the intention. I was away for the weekend this past
Yeah.
weekend. I missed a raid night as well. I talked about that earlier. So that's why streams didn't really pick up this weekend. But hopefully, as the week goes on, I'll be able to stream a little bit more, and we'll be able to pick the streams back up.
Yeah, and I know what you're thinking, folks. Well, Scott, why couldn't you have streamed? And to that I say, shut up.
That is a good question, though, Scott. Why didn't you stream? Come on, we missed a whole raid night.
I had a lot going on. A lot going on last week.
But all right, well, I appreciate everybody listening. And Scott and I will just be over here until next week, and just sitting on our fingers and our toes, and doing some keys, and just yelling into the void.
Sitting on our toes? What the fuck?